Both the New York Times and the Washington Post have new reports about the mind of Donald Trump, which is filled with things that are not true, that he spews both publicly and privately, leaving people in the White House to wonder how his mind actually works, if we can use the word works. According to the Times and Washington Post, people who are close to the president don't know what he believes and doesn't believe, but they do know that he constantly says things that are provably untrue. And one of the things that he has recently been going back to is the Access Hollywood video, which shows him bragging about his preferred methods of sexual assault. According to new reports on the president's mental state, the president is privately telling people that the Access Hollywood video is fake, meaning the voice you hear on this video speaking as Donald Trump is not Donald Trump.
And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
Whatever you want.
Grab them by the you can do anything.
Look at those legs. All I can see is the legs.
No, it looks good.
Come on, shorty.
Oh, nice legs, huh?
Oof, get out of the way, honey. That's good legs. Go ahead.
It's always good if you don't fall out of the bus. Like Ford, Gerald Ford, remember?
Down below. Pull the hand.
Hello, how are you? Hi.
Mr. Trump, how
nice
are
seeing you.
Pleasure to
Terrific.
meet you.
No word on whether Donald Trump believes that that was Donald Trump who got out of that bus. None of the people around Donald Trump who heard him say this would dare to tell him afterwards that they actually heard him very clearly speaking on the Access Hollywood video and that they saw and heard him apologize for every word he said on the Access Hollywood video.
I said it, I was wrong, and I apologize.
The Times reports in January, shortly before his inauguration, Mr. Trump told a Republican senator that he wanted to investigate the recording that had him boasting about grabbing women's genitals. "We don't think that was my voice," Mr. Trump told the senator, according to a person familiar with the conversation. Conservative British Prime Minister Theresa May was outraged by the president's erratic behavior today when the president retweeted unverified videos posted by the leader of a British extremist group called Britain First. Prime Minister Theresa May said it is wrong for the president to have done this. To consider what else is wrong with the president, joining us now is Dr. Lance Dotus of the Boston Psychoanalytic Society and Institute. He's a former assistant professor of psychiatry at Harvard Medical School. And back with us is Eugene Robinson. Dr. Dotus, what are we seeing here in these new stories about the president telling people things that they absolutely know to be true, that are on video, where they hear his voice? That's fake. That's not me, even after he publicly apologized for every word of it?
Yes, well, I think it's another example of his being close to psychosis when he is stressed. When he says things like this, which are not in his interest, he would be better off saying, I'm sorry, that was a mistake, and let it go. But when he goes back and then denies reality, people have trouble understanding that. The simple explanation for it, which people don't want to hear, is that he's not in control of himself. This is what we mean when we say that somebody is becoming psychotic or is briefly psychotic. So all of his delusional ideas come up when he is stressed in some way, and then he loses track of reality because it doesn't fit what he needs to believe. The problem has been that we think of people as psychotic people as being folks who think that they are Napoleon, and that's easy to tell. And if you're not that, people think you're not psychotic. But unfortunately, the world is more complicated, and people like Donald Trump are on the border, and they slip into delusional thinking when stressed. An extremely dangerous thing, naturally, for anybody, especially somebody who has been so wantonly unconcerned about the welfare of others and willing to do anything to promote himself. So he's an enormous present danger to us from the standpoint of creating a nuclear war, and even from the standpoint of doing what he can to destroy democracy as well as attacking ethnic groups the way he's done.
Gene Robinson, Dr. Dotis just said something right at the beginning of that that's so important. He said that it's not in his interest, it is not in Donald Trump's interest to say anything that brings up the Access Hollywood video again. And here we are running it because of things that Donald Trump himself has said, and any other politician would understand exactly what the doctor said. He wouldn't need a psychiatrist to tell him it is not in your interest to do this. And so that's where this becomes so fascinating, is that the president is constantly doing things against his own interest, and we've just heard from the doctors because he has no control over that.
Yeah, look, as you know, Lawrence, I've written about Donald Trump's mental health several times. I may write about it again tomorrow. I'm a layman. I don't have Dr. Dotis's expertise, certainly, though I have been buttonholed and cornered and emailed by psychiatrists and psychologists for months, giving me their assessment of his mental health. And here's what I wonder. I wonder if at some point the sort of old New York playboy Donald Trump, who was in the tabloids, who would call up Page Six in the guise of some imaginary PR guy, but who was in on the joke. This Donald Trump who created this sort of fake reality, but was in on the joke and knew that he was doing it. Did he at some point lose that awareness? Did he at some point start believing in the fake reality that he creates? And so is he able to actually convince himself that that's not him in the bus? Actually convince himself that that President Obama was not born in Hawaii? Actually convince himself of ridiculous things? And that's a really dangerous thing for the President of the United States to be living in this sort of fantasy world.
Dr. Dotis, that goes straight back to you to react to what Gene just had to say. What is that we're seeing?
Well, again, it's once you start out with the idea, with the understanding that this is a very sick man, he is truly very sick, then nothing is surprising. All of these delusional thoughts are not surprising. And, those of us who've been saying this for a long time have been able to correctly predict the things that have happened. And going forward, I will not be surprised by anything. If he were to try to dissolve the Constitution, that wouldn't shock me. Fire the Supreme Court, wage nuclear war on North Korea. These things might seem shocking, but they're consistent. He has always been consistent in this. Once you understand that he is about him, and it's a very deeply disturbed issue, he needs to, not just that he wants to, he needs to. He's not clever at all. He has to protect himself from what he sees as an existential threat by denying reality. Once you understand that, everything else follows, and it's extremely dangerous.
So, Gene, let's see if us amateurs can then apply what we've just learned to this, which is this report from the New York Times saying Mr. Trump has used closed-door conversations to question the authenticity of President Barack Obama's birth certificate. So does he need to never be wrong? Is that a reality he needs, and is that what he's reaching for in that moment?
Well, that's clearly a reality for Donald Trump, and there are 100 examples from his presidency, really, of things when he's presented with facts. He says something, and it is demonstrated that it's simply not true. The crowd size, for example, at the inauguration, and he has to be shown to be right. So he had to send poor Sean Spicer out to lie to everyone in his first appearance before the press, and insist that black was white because Donald Trump said black was white, and he has to be right. He has this need, and it's very deep-seated. I think that the doctor is right that it's not cleverness or deception from his point of view. It's something that he needs.
Dr. Dotis, I get the feeling that when you dip into any viewing of political pundits on these shows talking about what Donald Trump did today, that you are probably feeling that the analysis is missing the point whenever it's not turning on the notion that this is a very sick man.
Well, I think that's true. It's not that what they're saying isn't so. I mean, that many observers have accurately said that he's ill. But yes, I think that if not just the commentators, but the Congress needs to understand all those people who are now supporting Donald Trump are kidding themselves if they think that this is not an extremely incapable, disordered, a sick individual. They're kidding themselves, and no one seems to want to accept that. Someone else pointed out that the worst possible case for America is to have somebody who is not grossly psychotic, which everyone would know and throw him out, but close enough with a veneer to get by. That's Donald Trump. He's like the classic, he's like the classic villain in the James Bond movies or any other literature. He's villainous because of his sociopathy, his psychopathy, but with a tremendous veneer, which he is extremely good at. And people keep on looking at the veneer.
Dr. Lance Dotus, thank you very much for joining us once again.
Sure.
Really important to have your input. Eugene Robinson, thank you, as always, for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.